Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in your life when nothing adds up. You look at your circumstances and they don't reflect your effort. You look at your surroundings and they don't reflect your dreams. You're asking yourself, why me? Why now? Why this? And if you're not careful, you'll believe the lie that life is out of control. But I came here to tell you, when life doesn't make sense, it's not because it has no meaning. It's because you haven't discovered the meaning yet. See, the greatest breakthroughs in life don't happen when everything makes sense. They happen when you decide to believe there is sense in the midst of the mess. That's what changes everything. Let me take you to school for a minute. There's a principle in physics called entropy. It tells us that left to itself, everything moves toward disorder. That's what life looks like sometimes. But here's the catch. What looks like disorder is often the raw material of divine design. God does his greatest work in the dark. He does his finest shaping when you feel like you're breaking. What you call confusion, he calls construction. When a building is being renovated, it looks worse before it looks better. And some of you are in the middle of a divine renovation. It's noisy, it's dusty, it doesn't feel good. But that doesn't mean it's not working. What if the delay isn't punishment? It's preparation. What if the detour is not rejection? It's redirection. Don't measure your value by what you're going through, measure it by what you're growing into. A seed doesn't look like the tree, and the soil doesn't feel like success, but planted things go through dark seasons before fruitful ones. Your pain may be your planting season. Now here's the secret. The moment you stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what is this trying to produce in me, your entire world begins to shift. That's when you stop seeing yourself as a victim and start walking like a vessel. That's when power shows up. That's when peace returns. That's when purpose takes over. And I want you to hear me clearly. You are not broken beyond repair. You are being refined for reward. Life doesn't have to make sense for you to make progress. What changes everything is not that your situation shifts, but that your perspective does. So when life doesn't make sense, don't quit. Interpret it. Don't curse the darkness. Search for the light. Don't back down. Lean in. Because every setback carries the seed of a setup, and every trial holds the blueprint for your transformation. When life feels chaotic, when doors close, relationships end, or plans fall apart, it's easy to think everything is random, like we're caught in a whirlwind without direction. But here's what you need to understand. Your life has a design, even when it doesn't make sense to you. Just because you can't see the blueprint doesn't mean there isn't one. See, most people are waiting for everything to be clear before they move forward, but faith doesn't work like that. Faith starts moving when things are still blurry. And often, what looks like disorder is simply a process you're not trained to recognize. Imagine standing in front of a master artist while they're in the middle of painting. You see splashes of color, scattered lines, and strange angles. It looks like confusion, but the artist knows the end from the beginning. They see the masterpiece before the first stroke. And while it may not look like much to the untrained eye, it's becoming something beautiful. That's your life. God, the master artist, knows exactly what he's creating with every brushstroke of your experience. You might be looking at your life and thinking, this isn't how I planned it. This isn't what I wanted. But here's the truth. Some of the most powerful purposes are born from the most painful processes. What if the chaos you're facing isn't a breakdown, but a build-up? What if the pain is not punishment, but preparation? Just like muscles grow through resistance, your purpose grows through pressure. Now, this is where most people miss it. They interpret the storm as the signal to stop. They think disorder is the sign that something's wrong, but that's only because they don't understand divine order. See, there's a difference between disorder and design in progress. Construction zones are messy. You see dust, debris, and blocked paths, but it doesn't mean there's no plan. It means the plan is unfolding. Your job is not to understand every step. Your job is to trust the one who does. If you're walking by faith, you won't always understand the timing. You won't always recognize the terrain, but your progress is still valid. Just because it doesn't make sense now doesn't mean it won't later. Hindsight brings clarity, but faith brings movement, and here's something powerful to remember. Even confusion has a role. Confusion drives you to ask deeper questions, to seek greater truth, to grow beyond surface-level living. When everything is predictable, you settle, but when life disrupts your comfort, it calls you to grow, and that's when your design begins to activate. You were never made to live a predictable life. You were made for purpose. And purpose always comes with a process. So don't curse the chaos. Don't fear the fog. Know this. There is a design, even when you can't see the full picture. Trust the process. Walk by faith. And know that life's greatest meaning is often found on the other side of confusion. Just because your circumstances are painful doesn't mean you've lost your value. Let me say that again for somebody who's in a dark season right now. Your situation is not your identity. You are not your debt. You are not your divorce. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your disappointments. The value of a thing is never based on what it's going through. It's based on what it is at its core. And you, my friend, were created with purpose, with intention, and with greatness in your DNA. See, one of the biggest lies the enemy tells you in tough seasons is that because you're in the valley, you no longer matter. But I'm here to tell you, gold is still gold even when it's buried in the dirt. Its worth doesn't change because of its environment. Its essence stays the same. It just needs to be discovered, refined, and positioned correctly. That's exactly what your life is like. You might be in a difficult place. You might be hidden right now. You might feel overlooked, forgotten, undervalued, but that doesn't diminish your worth. The world teaches us to base value on visibility. If it's not seen, it must not be valuable. But truth says the opposite. Think about this. The most precious parts of your body, your heart, your lungs, your mind, they're not visible to the outside world, but without them, you wouldn't survive. Just because something is hidden doesn't mean it isn't critical, and just because your breakthrough hasn't shown up yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. Let me go deeper. Diamonds don't come from comfort. They're formed under pressure. Pearls don't form in light. They're born from irritation deep inside an oyster. Oil doesn't come from sitting olives. It comes from crushed ones. So what if your pain isn't a sign that something's wrong, but that something valuable is being produced? The pressing you're going through might be what's pulling out the treasure inside of you. When you understand your value, you stop begging for validation. You stop compromising for acceptance. You stop shrinking to fit into broken spaces. Why? Because you know that just because life got hard doesn't mean you got weaker. In fact, you might be stronger than ever. You just haven't realized it yet. So hold your head up. Stop letting your circumstances speak louder than your calling. Stop measuring your worth by temporary events. The storm may come, but it doesn't change who you are. You're not your struggle. You're not your past. You are valuable, chosen, designed, and necessary. And when you start walking like you believe that, everything around you will begin to shift. Not because the world suddenly made it easy, but because you remembered who you were, even in the hard places. We live in a culture that celebrates speed. We want everything now, fast results, instant answers, quick success, but the kingdom of God, and the principles that govern real wealth, purpose, and transformation don't operate on your clock. See, we think if it hasn't happened yet, it must not be coming. If the door hasn't opened, maybe it's locked for good. If the opportunity hasn't shown up, maybe it was never ours. But that's not how divine timing works. God's delays are not God's denials. Sometimes the answer is yes, but not yet. And if you move too soon, you can mishandle the very thing that was meant to bless you. Think of it like fruit. If you pick it before it's ripe, it won't taste right. It won't nourish you like it should. That's not because the fruit was bad, it's because it wasn't ready. And sometimes in life, you're not ready either. There are things you've been praying for that God hasn't released, not because He's trying to punish you, but because He's preparing you. When you rush the process, you bypass the preparation. And when you bypass the preparation, you forfeit the capacity to sustain what you were meant to receive. You don't want a blessing that breaks you. You want a blessing that builds you. And that means you need to be processed before you're positioned. Let me make it practical. David was anointed king as a teenager, but he didn't sit on the throne until years later. In between the promise and the promotion, there was a process. He had to fight giants, endure betrayal, run from enemies, and learn how to lead in the wilderness. Why? Because the throne requires more than oil. It requires maturity. It requires wisdom. It requires faith that's been tested, and that only comes through time. Waiting is not wasted when it's used wisely. Delays are an invitation to grow, not a reason to give up. Instead of asking, "Why hasn't it happened yet?" start asking, "What do I need to become before it happens?" That shift in mindset is the difference between frustration and preparation. See, God isn't just trying to give you something, He's trying to make you someone. And if you keep thinking delay equals denial, you'll miss the opportunity to become. You'll quit too early, you'll settle for less, and you'll label temporary seasons as permanent identities. But I came to remind you, just because it's taking time doesn't mean it's not coming. Just because it's slow doesn't mean it's stuck. The delay is not the end. It's just a pause for preparation. Keep showing up. Keep believing. Keep building. Because when the time is right, not your time, but the right time, what's yours will not miss you. And you'll realize the delay didn't take anything from you. It gave you everything you needed to handle what was coming. If you want to transform your life, your finances, your mindset, your relationship, you must understand a truth that most people overlook. Wealth and wisdom follow the willing. Notice, I didn't say the educated, the talented, or even the most spiritual. I said the willing. Why? Because willingness is the gateway to growth. You don't have to know everything to start. You just have to be willing to learn. You don't have to be perfect to move. You just have to be willing to obey the principles. So many people are stuck not because life is unfair, but because they're unwilling to do what success requires. They want results without responsibility. They want harvest without sowing. They want transformation without obedience to truth. But life doesn't work that way. You can't get the benefits of the principle if you're not willing to practice it. The law of sowing and reaping doesn't care about your emotions. It responds to your execution. There are universal laws that govern how life works. Laws of money, laws of relationships, laws of growth. And here's what's powerful. Those laws don't change based on how you feel. They don't shift based on your background. They aren't biased, but they are activated by willingness. If you're willing to obey the law will work for you. If you're willing to humble yourself and learn, wisdom will open the door. If you're willing to move forward even when you're afraid, courage will meet you there. There are people right now who are less qualified than you, less talented than you, and less experienced than you. But they're further ahead, not because they're better, but because they're willing to take the risk, willing to fail, willing to look foolish until they master the thing, willing to ask questions, willing to invest in their growth. And that willingness is what's making the difference. Willingness is a seed. Every time you say yes to truth, you plant something in your future. And over time, that seed turns into fruit, wealth of mindset, wealth of strategy, wealth of relationships, and yes, financial wealth too. The reason most people remain stuck is not because they're incapable. It's because they won't yield. They won't submit to the process. They won't become students. But those who are willing, they go from average to exceptional. You want everything in your life to change, then make a decision today to become radically willing, willing to work, willing to grow, willing to take responsibility, willing to forgive, willing to align your habits with your vision. Because once you become willing, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you've positioned yourself to cooperate with the principles that unlock power. So don't pray for ease, pray for willingness. Don't ask for shortcuts, ask for strategy. When life sees you're willing, life begins to respond, and what once looked impossible starts becoming inevitable. Your life doesn't change just because your situation changes. It changes because your mindset does. You've heard it said before, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens. That's not just a motivational slogan, that's a universal principle. Life is full of unexpected events, painful moments, confusing seasons. You can't control all of that, but you can control what you decide it means, and that decision, that's the turning point of transformation. You see, two people can go through the exact same struggle and come out with two very different outcomes. One gets bitter, the other gets better. One gets paralyzed, the other gets promoted. Why? Because of mindset. Because of how they interpreted the pain. One saw it as the end, the other saw it as training. One said, "Why me?" The other said, "What is this preparing me for?" The meaning you assign to your circumstances determines the direction of your life. When you change your mindset, everything else starts aligning. But most people live in reaction mode. They let life tell them who they are. They let failure define them. They let delay discourage them. But hear me, your situation is not the authority. Your interpretation is, and you have the power to shift that in a moment. You can decide that what broke you is going to build you. You can decide that what delayed you is preparing you. You can decide that every obstacle is an opportunity in disguise. Now, I'm not saying ignore the pain. I'm not saying pretend like everything is good when it's not. I'm saying redefine what the pain means. Use it, learn from it, grow through it. You are not a victim of what happened. You are the interpreter of what happened. And if you can change the way you see it, you can change the way you live through it. That's why Myron Golden teaches from principle, because principles override emotion. Principles give you something to stand on when life feels unstable. If you build your mindset on truth, you won't be shaken by trouble. That mindset becomes your foundation, and when storms come, and they will, you don't fall apart. You stand strong because your meaning is rooted in something greater than the moment. So the question isn't, when will life make sense? The question is, how can I start seeing my life through the lens of purpose right now? The answer is in your mindset. You get to choose victim or vessel, pain or purpose, breakdown or breakthrough. When you choose to see meaning where others see mess, that's when everything changes. Not because the world suddenly makes sense, but because you've decided to make sense of it through wisdom. That's where peace comes from. That's where power is born, not from the outside, but from within. If there's one truth I want you to walk away with today, it's this. Life doesn't have to make sense for it to serve your purpose. You don't need clarity to begin. You need faith to continue. Because the greatest transformations are born in moments of confusion, in seasons of waiting, in places of pressure. That's where destiny is forged. That's where meaning is discovered. You may be in a season right now where things look uncertain. The plans you had didn't work out. The doors you prayed for didn't open. The people you counted on walked away. But hear me. None of that changes your value. None of that disqualifies your future. You are not lost. You are not late. You are being led. And when life feels most confusing, that's often when God is constructing something deeper in you. Your job is not to have all the answers. Your job is to stay willing. Willing to learn, willing to grow, willing to trust, willing to obey the principles even when you don't feel like it, because wisdom and wealth follow the willing, not the wishful. Your mindset is the lens that gives life its meaning. Change your interpretation and you change your experience. Refuse to be defined by your pain, be refined by it. Stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start declaring, this is preparing me for what's next. So when life doesn't make sense, and trust me, sometimes it won't, don't retreat. Don't panic. Don't bow to fear. Instead, lean into the process. Stand on principle. Speak truth to your storm and walk like someone who knows this isn't the end. This is the turning point. Because when you shift your perspective, when you embrace the process, when you remember your value, when you obey the principles, and when you walk with faith even in the dark, that's when everything changes. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Let that be the moment that defines the rest of your life.